All right, good morning, YouTube. If you have ever decided to take a Kylo Ren approach to increasing your 1 rep max, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, because in today's video, we're going to be discussing how to implement higher training frequencies to get better strength results. So my name is Carlos the King, StanStrength.com. In the previous video, I talked about the why of it. So if you haven't seen that video and you don't know if this information is going to be particularly useful to you, I recommend that you watch that video. But anyway, let's get into the topic. So the number one thing we need to consider here, let's say as the guiding question is, okay, I've decided that I want to increase my training frequency, or I've decided to keep my frequency just minimally low. What do I need to do in my training, in my programming, to make sure that I'm still making progress, not leaving too much gains out off the table unnecessarily? So when you do put things at maintenance, when you do put things as a lower priority, naturally, as a result, you're not going to be getting the best results you can. But how do you make sure that you're not going too far with that, right? And that's what we're going to be discussing today. So the first thing you want to think about is that the way you train a lift will depend on how frequently you train it. So I'm going to be breaking down with you 1 time a week, 2 times a week, 3 times a week, and beyond that, right? So the way I want you to think about this, I want you to think that there's a spectrum, okay? On one hand, you have, sorry, my dog is going crazy, I guess. I just walked him, don't know why. But on one hand, you have lifts that you just treat like vegetables, you know? They're a necessary evil. Everyone tells you they're great, but they're not really something that vibes with you on a personal level. But like, let's say it does feel good, it does give you results, but it's just something you're not the biggest fan of, right? In that case, that's something you usually use at just 1 time a week. Now, let's say you go more so onto the other side and you want to train it almost every day because you just love it and this is the way, right? In that situation, that's where you kind of have like priorities. That's where you put so much effort into. It's what you're obsessed about. And that is where you want to dedicate a lot of work. Now, you can't just stay on either ends of these spectrums all the time, year round, without making any changes. At least I wouldn't recommend it. So what do? Not only does the way you train a lift depend on the frequency you allocate it, but what is the goal? So if you want to prioritize a certain muscle group, or if it's a muscle group that you don't really care about, I recommend training it at least once a week. We know that you benefit from better results if you train it more frequently. However, we also know that bro splits, body part splits, they do work when volume is equated. So if you can just knock out all the volume you need for that muscle group in 1 day, just do that. This is what I do with my leg training, quite honestly. I'm not the biggest fan of leg training. I make that very clear, but it is on that end of the spectrum where it's like vegetables to me, you know? It's a necessary evil. We need it in our lives. We can't dispute its importance, but I'm gonna leave it right there, okay? That's what squats are for me. That's what lower body training is for me. That's what split squats are for me. But I leave that on that side. We know that if you just have 1 day where volume is, you know, well within the recommendations that are established, you're gonna get results. So you can train things 1 time a week and still make great progress. Now on the other side, where you want to go just like, you know what, I want to squat every day. Like I want to be able to put something on my back and just lift it heavy every single day. Then that is on the other side of the spectrum. But here's the thing. If your goal is size, I'm not really of the opinion that that's the best way to go about it, at least for certain movements. The next part is strength. If you want to increase your 1 rep max, Matt Vina has released a lot of short videos talking about his high frequency approach. And you know, he was lifting or doing the power lifts, the squat, bench, and deadlift 6 days a week. And there are a lot of programs with like Smolov, Bulgarian method, that use these higher frequency methods for results. Now, if you are more focused on size, I do think that your striking range for frequency should be 1 to 3 times. 1 time if it's more so on maintenance, minimum effective volume, minimum effective dose. That's where 1 time a week really fits in. 2 times a week is what I personally like to be standard for this reason. If you decide to do everything on 1 day but you decide to add more, more, and more to it, eventually what's going to happen is that whatever happens first gets a lot of love and attention, gets a lot of results, and whatever happens later just diminishes in its effectiveness. So that's why we have things like upper lower splits, because you just take that one workout, split it into two, so that way the quality of each movement, each exercise, each set is increased by the fact that you're not entering it as fatigued as you would have if it was just all on one day. Then if we go into 3 times a week, if you go into 3 times a week, this is still where you're getting enough recovery, you're still able to get quality work done, and that is going to be an advantage to you for size, right? Because one thing that's really important to understand here is that muscles don't grow in the gym, they grow at rest. This is why if you look at Matt Vina and his high frequency approach, I'm not saying he's small by any means. He is very muscular, but if you heard that he was squatting 6 days a week and he was lifting 60 to 80% of his 1 rep max 6 days a week, would you expect him to have like Ronnie Coleman legs? I feel like the average person would. I feel like most people would, and he doesn't. And I'm like, he has very developed legs, and don't get me wrong, but it's not like he has Mr. Olympia style legs, because there's a difference between training for size and training for strength. If he were to go with a more size approach and really hit it hard with the amount of volume and intensity that is needed to elicit a hypertrophy response, he would need time to rest and recover, which is why I recommend a striking range of 1 to 3 times a week. Now, if you want to increase strength, this is where you have a lot more freedom, and you can go even up to 1 to 6 times per week. I personally think it's better to go 2 to 4. That's kind of my Goldilocks zone, but there are ways to implement it if you literally only care about strength. If size is a component, then 2 to 4 is going to be the absolute most. But that is really dependent on, like I said, how you decide to train a lift and what the goal is. If you are a size-focused power builder or a strength-focused power builder, those are things that are going to motivate the decisions that you need to make. And now let's get into how to implement these things depending on what you choose. So let's say you are going to train a lift 1 time a week. If you are going to train a lift 1 time per week, I want you to max out, whether it be max reps, max weight, and then you do back offsets. You need to do something like that, right? Because you are only training that lift 1 time a week, whether it be the squat or the bench, the deadlift, because you're only training 1 time a week, I highly recommend that you go as intense as possible, as safely as possible. Reason being is I truly believe that strength is one of the best ways not only to measure size progress, but it's also one of the best ways to maintain it. I have found that when I'm like doing a cut or something of that nature, which is, rare, but when I am cutting and I'm like trying to maintain the size of a muscle, the most effective thing I can do for a variety of reasons is just strength train. Partly because it requires less energy. I do think that doing more exercises, doing more volume, that takes a lot out of you. And when you're in a deficit, it might be more of a hindrance than it is a help. So I find that if I just do heavy strength training, do low rep work with high weight, not only do I keep most of my strength, but I also maintain almost all the size, right? So that's why I really recommend that if you are, let's say, putting something on the back burner, train it like a power lifter. Train it for strength. Get it stronger so that way it doesn't get smaller, okay? So max out. Either go max reps, so do an AMRAP set, do some type of rep scheme or rep progression or rep goal system or backloading, something of that nature. Do something like that if you decide to do a max rep approach. The other way is to do max reps and do a 5 rep max or a 90% of your max, 3 sets of 1 at 90%. That's a really time tested method I got from Alpha Destiny. It works. Doubles, triples, things of that nature, right? And then do back offsets to complement that in a lower rep range. So maybe like the 2 to 5 range. The next thing I would recommend if you decide to train a lift only 1 time per week is that there should be a complementary exercise or a comparable exercise in the workout or in the program itself. So if you're only squatting 1 time a week, I do recommend that you still have leg press in there somewhere, either on the same day or on a different day. If you are deadlifting, I recommend you have rows. If you are benching, overhead pressing, you can go outside the plane and go from there. That is what I recommend if you are deciding to train only 1 time a week. Now, let's say you decide to bump it up to 2 times a week. There are 3 ways to go about this. My personal favorite is an intensity day and a volume day, or as I like to call it, a strength day and a size day. Reason being is because for strength, you need intensity and volume. For size, you need intensity and volume. But if you have the guiding principle or the guiding mission of strength or size, the ratio between the two will kind of vary. How you implement the two will kind of vary. So that's why it's important to keep that in mind. So on an intensity day, what I like to do is I like to keep most of my work within the 1 to 10 rep range. So it'll be lower once you get closer to the main movement, but as you go to the supplementary and accessory movements, then it goes only up to 10. I don't think that there's much finding to this anymore, or like much ground to it anymore, but the way that I remember like going about this is just the interference effect. I don't think, like I said, I'm not entirely sure if it's still valid, if it's still scientifically backed. You know, I haven't seen anything lately to support it. But what I remember when I would start lifting, they would say like, okay, on a strength day or an intensity day, your nervous system is being primed to lift heavy things. You don't want to give it a confusing signal by doing max weight and max reps in the same day, or at least max reps with, you know, like 20, 30 reps. So you want to try to keep the threshold of intensity the same across the movement. So you want to go heavy on your accessories, you want to go heavy on your supplemental exercises, you want to go heavy on your main lift. So that's how you do it. And then on a volume day, that's when you can kind of increase the range. So here on a volume day, what I like to go for is a 6 to 15 plus. So there are exceptions, you know, there are places and times to go above 15 reps in my opinion. I think 15 reps is kind of like that that cutoff point where literally anything after it is just kind of like a vanity project. So 225 for 20, 225 for 30, like let's say on bench press, right? I think you could get more if you decided to go maybe 245 for 15, 255 for 15, you know, just add weight, right? But, you know, me personally wanting to look like a football player, me wanting to look and be as strong as one, you know, I want to hit that 225 for 30. So it's not because I think it's more productive for size, it's just something that I want, right? But if I were to be just focused entirely on size, it would be hard for me to argue in favor of 30 plus reps or 20 plus reps when I could just add weight, be closer to failure with 15 reps. So that is an intensity day and a volume day, or a strength day and a size day. The thing you need to keep in mind here, which is why I made this channel, it's why I discuss things in power building terms, is that you have 2 hard days when you are training like this. When you have an intensity day and a volume day, these are 2 hard days of training. They're not meant to be easy. And that's why you need to make sure that you allocate volume appropriately, that you make sure that your training structure supports this, it allows you to recover and everything like that, right? And all that is covered by this channel. So if all that is useful to you, I recommend subscribing, because I will be continuing to make more content to help you with that. The next way to kind of go about this is more of a conjugate kind of way, where you have the max effort day and the dynamic effort day. On the max effort day, you know, it's as it implies. You're going to a 1 rep max. Some more like derivative forms of conjugate style training, like who take inspiration or influence from Louis Simmons. Louis Simmons, it was a 1 rep max. You're not doing max effort work if it's not a 1 rep max, but other places have kind of expanded that out to be like a 2 rep max, a 3 rep max. Some I go as far as 5. It's kind of rare to go that high, but generally speaking, it's the 1 to 3 rep range for a max, and then you do some back off work, some supplementary work to give yourself that volume, and then you have a speed day or a dynamic effort day, and that's where you're doing 8 to 12 sets of 1 to 3 reps with less than a minute of rest, right? The thing you want to keep here, or keep in mind here, is the fact that you really only have 1 hard training day. So the second day, the dynamic effort day, the speed day, the thing is, I'm not necessarily in favor of speed days thinking that that's what's causing you to get stronger. In my opinion, it's not the fact that you're lifting it faster that's getting it stronger. It's the fact that you're lifting sub-maximally, that you're lifting with better form, that you're lifting with more frequency, so you're practicing a skill. That's what's making you stronger. It's not the fact that I lifted this thing 10 times faster than the other day or whatever, that now I'm going to be so much stronger. No, I don't think that's the thing. I think it's you're recovering better and you're practicing. Those 2 things will elicit strength gains, and that's why I think that's where this works, in my opinion. The next way to kind of go about things, if you decide to train things 2 days a week, is a heavy day and a light day. So the difference between a heavy day and a light day and a intensity day and volume day, or strength and size day, is the fact that volume is actually the same. Volume is the same on a heavy light setup. So let's say you have 3x5 on one day and then 3x5 on another day. On the first day, you're doing 3x5 to a 5 rep max. And then on the other day, you're doing 3x5, 80% of whatever weight you use. That's literally it. You're just, one day is just arbitrarily lighter. 10 to 20% off is what I recommend for the most part. And that's it. All you're doing is the exact same work, the same exact volume. You might switch up some variations, and that is one way to go about it. Now that's just loading. That's just intensity. That's just intensity when it comes to changing the way you train things frequently. One way I also recommend changing things frequently once you start adding in more training sessions is the exercise itself. So with a 2 times per week setup, I recommend being closer in specificity, meaning on one day you could do your standard barbell bench press, on another day you close grip bench. One day you squat, the other day you front squat or safety bar squat or box squat. On one day you deadlift, and then the other day you do Romanian deads. That is one way to go about it as well, because on one day you have a harder movement because it's a movement that you can lift more weight on, and then on the other day you have a lighter movement. I will continue to get into that with the next example, which is 3 days per week. So with 3 days per week, you are going to run either a heavy light medium, which is what I recommend, or you can just go to, like, let's say a daily top set, right? The daily top set option is not what I recommend for a long amount of time, but it can be your, let's say, like your entry into things that like Smolov, Bulgarian method, or something like that. Start out with 3 days a week and then build from there. So with the heavy light medium, there's 3 things that you can switch up. Like I mentioned, intensity thresholds. This is usually the main way people like to talk about heavy, light, medium. Is on a heavy day, you're lifting heavy. On a light day, you're lifting light. It's very self-explanatory. But another way you can kind of go about it is also with volume. So let's say on your heavy day, you maybe do 1 hard set. On your light day, you might do 2 sets, but it's just mainly like really light rep work. And then on your medium day, that's where you're kind of getting like 3 to 5 sets of 5 to 8 reps or something of that nature. On your heavy day, you're doing 1 hard set and then some back off sets at an appropriate intensity. So maybe 70 to 90% of your max. And then on medium day, you're probably closer to 60 to 80. And then on your light day, maybe around 50. So I'm a percentage guy, so hope I didn't lose you there. And that's just intensity. Now, and volume, intensity and volume. Now let's talk about exercise selection. On your heavy day, maybe you could do barbell bench press. On your light day, you do dumbbell bench press. On your medium day, you do close grip. You can even go outside the plane. So maybe on a heavy day, you do your bench. On a light day, you do some light shoulder pressing. And I mean light, so like start like whatever weight you can do for about 15 reps, do it for 8 to 10. And then on a medium day, close grip bench. So that is a heavy, light, medium setup. Now, like I said, there is a way to kind of implement the Smolov and Bulgarian methods with a 3-day split and then build from there. But I'll kind of, anything that I say regarding that will apply to the 4-day or 4 times per week setup, which is Smolov and Bulgarian. Smolov, it's a 4 time per week program. It's a 4 time per week protocol. It's percentage based. It tells you exactly what you need to hit, exactly what you need to do. And you just kind of follow that, right? You're training in that 60 to 80% range, and then you're going from there. Now, Bulgarian is where it gets interesting because it actually recommends that you go to a 95% of your max every day, 6 days a week. I actually don't recommend that. I would actually bring that down to 90% if you ever did decide to run Bulgarian, just so you get that added benefit of recovery. But, you know, I don't think it's really all that necessary to use it. But at the same time, the results do speak for themselves. So it's really what you need to think about. Now, if you were to do a 4 times plus, right? So 4 and up, right? 4, 5, 6, you know, I don't recommend doing anything 7 days a week. If you decide to take that approach, what I would do is I would actually go back to your 3-day per week setup and just distribute that work across all 6 days. That, to me, is the more responsible option. That, to me, is the more reasonable option. It's going to cause you to burn out less. It actually makes this approach a bit more sustainable. And that is how you handle these higher frequencies of training. You start out with something very minor, very meager, and you just build from there. Now, where does this leave you? Where should you begin? And this is where the standard split is literally like this. You can rearrange the order into either a lower upper or an upper lower, but day 1 you bench, day 2 you squat, day 3 you bench, and day 4 you deadlift. You can invert that, you can reverse that, you can switch things around. I wouldn't recommend squatting and then deadlifting, but keep a day in between those two. That's the standard split for powerlifting that you can just add on to down the line, right? Another variation of this that I like is day 1 you bench, day 2 you squat, day 3 you overhead press, and day 4 you deadlift. And then what you'll do from there is you start to add sorry, we're reviewing Irish literature in one of my classes, so I guess it just came out. But anyway, once you have that baseline, right? Once you have that base of frequency where everything's just 1 time a week, slowly add from there. One thing I really recommend, and this is like one of the best pieces of advice I've ever been given when I started lifting weights, is that change things slowly. Start with something very basic, go back to basics, and then slowly add things in. That's appropriate, right? So let's say on a bench, squat, bench, deadlift split. On one day you do regular bench, on the other day you do close grip, and then you're going to go from there. On your squat day, you're starting to notice that 1 squat day is no longer enough. Add a lighter squat day to your deadlift day. You start to notice that just conventional deadlift is no longer enough, so maybe after your deadlift you do back off sets with stiff leg or Romanian, or you put that work on your squat day to kind of round things out and spread things out a bit more. Those are things that you can do. Those are changes that you can manipulate over time as you start to increase your frequency. But a 1 time per week frequency is a great place to start, with the exception of maybe the bench. That's it for this video. I hope I didn't confuse you too much. I hope you take this advice and make it useful, make it work, and let me know what you find. Let me know how you kind of implement this. Let me know if you've implemented this before, or if this is new to you, right? But other than that, my name is Karel Saking, StanStrength.com. If you'd like to work with me as a coach where I can kind of take care of this for you, all of that is available into the link in the description below. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day.